All right, welcome on in, lacrosse fans and sports bettors alike. It's Bet On Lacrosse time, even when, it's the All-Star break. Last week, everybody had a little bit of a rest from lacrosse, but I don't know about you guys. I cannot bet another baseball game. I need PLL to be back just for my sanity in betting sports. I'm your host, Dan Alexander, and we got a great crew with us for the show today. We're going to break down some PLL team futures. We're going to do some MVP talk, talk a little bit of the All-Star game, and then we'll give you some early thoughts on the Week 6 slate because we have lines for that already. Always exciting when you're able to see those lines drop, track the line moves throughout the week. So that's what we'll be doing here. If you don't want to do the work, that's what Bet On Lacrosse and our whole dais is here to do for you. So let's welcome on in the guys today. Again, like I said, great slate. We got Hutton Jackson, as always, Action Network producer, and, of course, the host of Pro Lacrosse Talk. We got Pickswise contributor, as well as behind the scenes working with us with Pro Lacrosse Talk. Charlie White is with us, and we also got a special guest that's been cashing tickets like crazy in the PLL. Krabs Bets is joining us. And, of course, you can always hop in and request to speak and be a part of the space. We would love to hear from you guys and gals and get your thoughts as well. So, Charlie, I'm going to start with you. How'd you do in Week 5, brother? And really, I think everybody who we're chatting with right now, we're all up some serious units this year in PLL, right, my man?
Yeah, not to toot my own horn, but 4-0 on my straight bets and 3 for my last 3 parlays. So I feel like we're seeing the board pretty well. We got some good numbers out there. A lot of value at this time of year when you think that Team A is going to be like the best team in the league and Team B is like the worst team in the league. But in reality, all these teams are pretty close together. So, yeah, with the numbers that thrown out, we get some good value, but hopefully we can carry it on to next week.
Yeah, we all were kind of saying, man, what a horrible time for this All-Star break to come around when we're all just rolling, seeing the board real well. Hutton, how about yourself? I know all of your plays are tracked on Action Network. You can download the Action Network app, track their own plays, see experts as well as great content on there. So people can see what you're posting. And I think you're running pretty hot this year too, aren't you, my man? How's it going, brother?
Yeah, honestly, giving out picks, I did well for the first 3 weeks, and then my past 2 weeks giving out picks, not actually that great, but we had live betting in Week 5, and I really made a lot of money live betting. That's where I kind of cleaned up. I had a few hits on the Water Dogs game. Actually went 4-0 on my picks there, including a live under 28.5 for the Chaos Cannons on that Sunday. But in terms of giving out picks, I went 1-2. But if you were watching, my tweets on when we were live betting, you were probably sitting pretty good because a lot of value, like the Archers were plus 100 tied at half, despite being favorites going into that game. That was one that I got. So a lot of opportunities with Pro Lacrosse betting, live betting. Hopefully they continue to give us live lines because I think the books got hit probably pretty hard with those live betting, even though that tends to be their bread and butter. So we'll see. Hopefully we continue to get those going forward, though.
Yeah, and on our last live show, we were just kind of saying, hey, if there is going to be live betting, because there was, some talk that there could have potentially been, to just hold on and potentially not make any plays before live betting, and you could get some insane numbers. We had over-unders that went all the way up to 30.5, and it was just some crazy just mispricing by some of those algorithms. And I know our guy Charlie, he was a little bummed since he couldn't get in on the action. He didn't have live bet where he was at. So he's beating up the bookies on the pre-flop. So only imagine if he was able to get in on the bloodbath that was live betting for bettors in Week 5 of the PLL. Hopefully those opportunities stay around. Really excited to welcome into Krabs Bets. You can always hear him behind the lines on Book It Sports, making terrific content and also making hella good picks as well across all sports. Love the stuff you do, my man. Happy to finally be on a show with you, Krabs. How's it going, brother?
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciated it. I don't know if I deserve that intro or not, but we've been absolutely caking on our PLL plays 6 in a row. Pretty fucking insane if you ask me. It's been keeping me afloat while baseball has been damn near impossible to bet on. Like you said, I'm tired of betting baseball every day. I miss the PLL. It comes at a perfect timing for the sports books, right? To give us a little break here, 2 weeks off from really diving into these cards. And I think they needed the break too. Hutton touched on it. They've got to be getting destroyed. We've been making too much money for them not to be. And these live lines, they don't know. I don't think these books know what they're doing, my man. I've been taking bets, pre-flop, like you said, and then hedging halfway through or getting plus money on the other side live and hitting both. It's been a crazy run. I am super excited for it to come back. I'm really excited for the All-Star game. Although my team, the Redwoods, might not be doing their job, we've been hitting our bets. So I'm not complaining. Super happy to be here, guys. Let's get after it.
Well, I'm right there with you, Krabs, because one of my preseason picks was going on the Redwoods. I thought I was getting great value, plus 800. Oh my God, they start hot out of the gate. How will this not be a better bet? You could get them at like 10-1 right now. So I'm feeling you're just crying as a fan, my man. My pocketbook not too happy with me. The bankroll saying, "What the hell were you doing, dude?" So I'm with you there, Krabs.
It's brutal, man. I hate to see it, but it's okay.
Speaking of futures, boys, let's get right into that. I want to get all your kind of thoughts on it because I feel like I said on our last episode, I have already placed 5 different futures. So just off of principle alone, when I have over half the league tied up in futures, I'm not placing any more. Although whenever we talk futures, I always am like wooed and like thinking, maybe I should sprinkle a little bit on another team here. So just to run it down, Hutton does an awesome job each and every week letting you know on Monday where's the best and longest odds that you can. We always preach shopping lines here. So have some different sports books so you can get down, maybe get some of those middling and hedge opportunities that Krabs was just talking about there. But I'll run down the numbers that Hutton has for us here. Atlas plus 400. That's available at MGM and Barstool. Whipsnakes 450 at MGM. Archers plus 450 on DK and Barstool. We got Chrome plus 550 on Caesars. Water Dogs, Caesars and MGM hanging a plus 700. Chaos plus 900 at Caesars. And then you got Redwoods and Cannons bringing up the rear. Redwoods 10-1, Cannons 12-1. Redwoods you can get at Caesars, DraftKings, and MGM. Cannons at Caesars, DraftKings, and Barstool. So that's where you can get your best odds if you still want to place a future. Hutton, since you so painstakingly curate all of that, a lot of Caesars being the longest odds, so they're just trying to get their handle up on these futures. Are you finding any value anywhere and anything that you're potentially placing on, or do you, like me, already have your eggs in about 700 different damn baskets?
Yeah, I definitely I'm taking a pause right now because I do have 4 futures right now. I have pretty much all the top teams other than the Whipsnakes. So I have Chrome. I didn't, obviously at that plus 2,000 early on. I got in on the Archers recently. They're my most recent team. Atlas, I got in at plus 450. And then I really like the Water Dogs team. I got in on them plus 900. And I'm pretty high on them going forward. So that would be a team that right now I would probably bet. The only thing I would maybe give you pause to wait if you do think the Chrome are going to win this coming week 6, then you might be able to get a better price on them. So maybe you wait till after their Chrome game if you still do like the Water Dogs. But I think their value starting to drop just because they are playing well. They just had a good game against the Whipsnakes. And they haven't really looked like a bad team at all through 4 weeks. Lost a tough one to the Cannons to open, but that was just a bad first half. Narrowly lost to the Whipsnakes. Had that amazing comeback by Chrome that set them up at 0-3, but since then they've looked really good. So they're a team that I'm buying stock now. Other than that, though, unless it's one of the favorites that you think is going to win, not a lot of value across the board, in my opinion.
And that's kind of like a buzzword, in sports betting media is value. You know what I mean? You hear it all the time, value, but like, what does value really mean? Like, Charlie, I'm wondering for you, you see these numbers. We just ran them down for folks. Again, you can always check out and, look on your sports book and see the different odds there. But, you run that down. Do you see, now that we're kind of at the quasi midpoint, so to speak, with the All-Star game in the season, is anything standing out to you with that buzzword value, or are you just kind of trying to get through this muck and figure out who the hell is going to win this thing?
Yeah, I'm not a huge futures bettor because there's so many things that can happen, like injuries, suspensions, all that kind of stuff that you just can't see coming. So I don't like to have my money wrapped up for too long. But right now, kind of like Hutton, seeing the Water Dogs plus 700 right now, like they've been playing pretty well. And I think anyone who understands the game of lacrosse knows that they have a lot of meat left on the bone. They can get a lot better. They had been without Sowers at 100% for probably the better half of the season. Withers has played 1.5 games. their defense just looks really well. Dylan Ward just came back. So I think that they have all the pieces to put together a pretty substantial run. I mean, they were the 1 seed in the PLL last year. Like, whatever you think that means, like, they were a pretty good team last year. They returned most of their players. Jack Hanna is just ready to break out. I love that guy. I think he's going to be one of the best midfielders in the league in a couple of years. But they got a lot of pieces. Like I said, Connor Kelly's an all-star, Zach Carrier's an all-star. And I think that if they put it together, they could be probably one of the most dangerous teams in the league. And probably the biggest value play I see is the Redwoods plus 1,000. They looked really, really bad for the first 2 weeks of the season. And I'm not going to deny that at all. They've looked a little bit better these past 2 weeks. They've lost 2 games in a row by 1 goal each to the Whip Snakes and to the Archers. Whether or not you think that that's replicable, they can keep playing close games and win those games and stuff. They're still arguably one of the most talented teams in the league. They still have T. Erlin, who last year was tied for first place in face-off win percentage with Trevor Baptiste. If he can kick it back into first gear and start winning 65-70% of face-offs, they can turn those 1-goal losses into 3 or 4 goal wins. So I think that with the talent they have on the offense, defense, Jack Kelly being a nice infusion in the goal as opposed to Tim Troutner, I think that they have a serious chance to be in the mix at season's end and make some noise. So those are my 2 best value plays on futures.
Yeah, and just kind of backing up Charlie's point, looking towards the Water Dogs there. Let's not forget that this is a team that has shown, hey, they have a propensity to potentially getting hot at the end of the season. So while they might not be playing their best lacrosse out of the gate, they showed last year they ended up as the 1 seed. They didn't really need to be playing, and the way that this is set up, it's only one team who's going to be ended up missing out. So, Krabs, I'm wondering for you, man, like, how do you attack futures markets? And, this could also kind of spill into, like, MVP, because I feel like if I am to bet a future, it's going to be more likely in this outright market where you're trying to pick a team to win a championship as opposed to MVP, which you have voting in. You have not really defined how they vote on these different awards. It's a lot more subjective. So I like Charlie, don't really get much into the future markets, but when I do, it's for outright winners. Like, how do you attack these markets? And as far as either of them, have you had any bets or any bets that you might place?
Yeah, I think you took the best approach. You're about to bet on every single team. No way that can lose, right? You take every team to win the whole thing. Gosh, that's a great idea. No way that loses. I'm not the biggest futures guy just in general. And lacrosse, it scares me a little bit just because of how volatile and how much shit changes just throughout the season, in my opinion. But I think you guys are in a good spot if you're snagging good value like Hutton did earlier this season with the Chrome. And you guys might have been in on that as well, but I think that was insane value there. But the keyword value, Dan, like you said, does value matter at the end of the day? You just got to click the right button that ends up hitting and put money in your account. And right now, value aside, I think it's the Atlas. I think they win the whole thing. I think they're the most complete team. I don't see how they lose. I think there's only one way that they don't end up winning the whole thing at this point. That's how dominant they are from what I've seen. And it's if Baptiste's injury is serious. And that kind of leads to our MVP future talk here. But from what I'm hearing, I'm a little bit worried from what I saw about a week and a half ago. I'm definitely worried. He could barely walk. He's not a young guy. So I'm definitely worried and curious to see how it plays out for him, how quickly he comes back. I don't think it's going to be as quick as people think. And that really hurts them, to be honest with you. So if I had to take something right now, I wouldn't even look for a value play. I like the take you guys set on the Water Dogs. I think they're getting better, and that's definitely the best value on the market currently, in my opinion. I'm with you guys. Definitely not on my Redwoods. But Atlas, I don't see how they lose. I don't see how they lose this. They're dominant.
Yeah, they just look damn good. I'm right there with you. And that's the thing is, like, I try not to get into futures too much. So often the whole reason behind having a future ticket is to be like, hey, I told you so. But when you're able to have a Chrome 20-1 ticket with several other tickets having your lowest return, like being like a 5-1 back in an 18 market, that's not a terrible way to do it. So yeah, I'm basically just spraying the board. Like, it's basically you play roulette and I placed on every single number except like 3 of them. And I know with how my betting luck is every now and then, the one I didn't play on is going to come up. The 00 green or the 0 green is going to come up on the roulette wheel and completely fuck me. But I'm ready for that. I'm ready and willing for it, Krabs.
Well, I think the green would be the Redwoods in this case. So
you're right.
You might be okay there.
You're right. So maybe that wouldn't screw me completely. But I hate that I lost out on 20 cents of value there on that one. So what are you gonna do? So you kind of alluded to it right there, brother. Is this whole MVP market? I placed Manny before the season, just, to have at least one ticket. That thing sweetened up a little bit, but the way that Tom Schreiber's playing has kind of muckied that water up a little bit. So, Hutton, how are you betting any futures? I know you were big on potentially sprinkling a little bit on Baptiste, but as Krabs was just kind of saying, hey, with that injury, does that hurt? Does that help his value? I don't know. If you're not on the field, it's hard to make a case for MVP unless your team looks that bad. So, just kind of give an MVP overview, some things that you're kind of seeing, and we'll let Charlie wrap that up before we get into some All-Star game and some PLL Week 6 leans.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week before Baptiste got injured, but, obviously his stock's rising. If I had to just purely pick MVP right now, it'd be Baptiste. But like you said, the injury kind of makes it a little bit interesting. I wouldn't bet him right now because of that injury, because it's interesting the way MVP, races work. If Baptiste misses a game and the Atlas lose, that probably helps his MVP case. But if he misses 2 or 3 games, maybe the Atlas win a couple of those or win all of them, well, then does that hurt his case? It's kind of like this narrative thing that you kind of always have to battle. And that's kind of what's tough about it. So, yeah, I definitely think the smart thing right now is to avoid betting on Baptiste until we see the extent of his injury. Although I do think right now he is the clear MVP based on just how everyone's performing. Jeff Teat could be up in that discussion, but you got Baptiste on that team already, probably arguably being the top guy, the reason why they have been so successful. And then, you talked about the Schreiber-Manny situation. Manny through 4 weeks looked like the clear guy that was making their motor turn, but they have so many weapons that Schreiber's maybe been the most consistent guy of the group. And then you have Marcus Holman that's turning in big games. So I'm actually kind of playing both sides of that. I have both on Schreiber and Manny at pretty good odds. I think I got Schreiber at plus 2,000 and Manny at something around maybe plus 1,300 or whatever. I forget. But the tough thing with those two guys is, I honestly don't recommend betting them right now. Maybe one of them if you really feel good about it, but it's too murky to determine who the MVP of their team is, let alone who might have a chance at winning MVP and dethroning, essentially Baptiste right now. And then the only other one I keep hitting it home, and I'm going to have to stop hitting it home once his value completely dries up, but he was, plus 15,000 at one point. Now he's plus 3,500, but Kyle Bernlohr, I think, is the clear guy who's the reason why the Whipsnakes are 4-1. The question is, though, in the overall MVP race, is he going to win? Is he going to beat a Baptiste? Is he going to beat a Schreiber or Manny? Probably not. We saw Blaze do it as a goalie last year, but that's very, very rare. So right now I still think there's a little bit of value with him still at that number. But it's tough for me to recommend doing that when I got in so early and, his value has dropped so drastically. It's hard for me to recommend, backing a goalie in this MVP race. But, if you are looking for a long shot, he's the guy that I think to do it. As long as the Whipsnakes continue to win, it's hard to make a case for anybody else on that team to be deserving of MVP than him.
I think one thing to consider is, do you guys think that the MVP will come from a team that did not win the championship? Because the past 3 years it's been like that. What do you guys think about that?
So, yeah, that's interesting, too, because they vote before the playoffs. So we're pretty much predicting the regular season MVP. But as you've looked, you've actually ended up having the finals MVP. I think all 3 years end up being the regular season MVP. Rambo won it. The award was announced before the finals. He ends up obviously winning it in overtime for the Whipsnakes. Then Zed Williams wins it. That was a little bit different case scenario because it was such a shortened season. They kind of combined the regular season and finals MVP together for Zed Williams. And then Blaze Reardon obviously went on a tear. He won MVP prior to the championship game and then brought home the championship. So I think you definitely want to choose a team that's kind of at the top. You're not going to see a team that's middle of the pack, regardless of how much they mean to their team. I think just the way lacrosse has been, winning it. Like you could say Zach Currier means a lot to the Water Dogs. I wouldn't place one on Zach Currier though. And same for, and that's why I'm maybe a little bit hesitant with the Bernlor pick too, because even though the Whipsnakes are 4-1, I'm not as high on them as some other teams. So, and that's where the Chrome situation is interesting with Wisnauskas, Nick Turn, and Malloy. You can make the case for all three of those guys. So there's a reason to not bet any of them because it's hard to predict. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it has to be a team that is is going to be at the top of the standings. And that's why I think the best look right now is Baptiste or Teat once you figure out who is the guy. And that's also why I would maybe avoid Lyle Thompson, because as much as Lyle means to his team, Cannons probably aren't going to even maybe make the playoffs, let alone make up that much noise if they do make the postseason. So that's why Lyle is probably not a good pick, even though you could make the case he's the most valuable player to his team compared to anybody.
Well, and no, I think it's a good question by Charlie, too, because think about the NFL MVP, for instance, or the NBA MVP. Like, we don't technically know how much either the regular season or playoffs play into it. Like for MVP, clearly the playoffs don't play in at all because Jokic is the MVP. He can't win a fucking game to save his life. You look at, and clearly there's no anger about Embiid in that statement at all. But you look at the NFL MVP, Aaron Rodgers wins it, and he chokes at home every year in the playoffs. So, I think it's a great question by Charlie. How much does playoffs play into it? Because if you were picking this game at the end of the regular season, would Blaze Reardon last year have been the MVP at the end of the regular season? Probably not. But with them winning the championship, you saw how he played down the stretch and he made a case for it. So like, Charlie, did you have somebody in mind when you opened up that question, or, you're just kind of trying to think through, like, how is this award actually voted on?
Well, I think 2 weeks ago, I tweeted out something about Will Manning deserves more MVP discussion. And then when I looked back at the last 3 MVPs coming from the championship team, I just think the Archers are going to choke every single year. They've kind of proved it year in and year out. So I was kind of hesitant to place a future on that. Like, Will Manning could have a lot of goals, but if they don't win the playoffs, then I don't think he's going to win.
Yeah, and I'd agree somewhat with that. And again, to clarify, they do vote before the postseason, even though it's announced right before the championship game. So I do know that actually is how the MVP voting, which is what makes it a little bit weird. Like last year, it was between Grant Ament and Blaze Reardon essentially for the MVP. Ament was in that discussion, even though they got eliminated, 2 weeks prior to that announcement of that award. So it is, like I said, a regular season award, even though when we look at it, we're like, oh, well, why didn't this guy get more discussion? It's voted on prior to that. I believe they vote on 2 or 3 weeks prior. So I do think there's something to the fact that the narrative of a player like Trevor Baptiste is obviously a player that has a strong narrative, whereas maybe somebody like Kyle Bernlor, you could make the case he means just as much to his team, but he's not one of the flashiest guys, and he's just not getting talked about enough in the discussion. So I don't think it really affects the voters per se, but that narrative, like, I don't think the voters are really looking at who's the most marketable, but I think the narrative does play into effect because as human beings, we're going to buy into a narrative and we're going to have our own personal biases. We're not looking straight at data. So I think there is a point to maybe not choosing the most marketable, but choosing the person that has the best narrative. And right now, I think that is clearly Trevor Baptiste, as long as an injury doesn't prevent him from playing in multiple games.
Yeah, we'll see how that ends up turning out. We're going to get into the All-Star game here in just a second, but real quick, we're talking all about these injuries and Trevor Baptiste and how it'll potentially affect them. Well, someone who's listening into the space requesting as a speaker, actually doctor in their title. So I'm guessing that's Cap, but we might as well see, does the doctor have any info on Trevor Baptiste, or how are you attacking some of these markets?
Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, actually not really thinking about MVP too much. Just want to take it back to more of the outright markets that you guys were talking about. Pretty familiar with lacrosse in general, played it in college and high school and such, but pretty new to the PLL as a market as a whole. But I tend to do more futures and more data-driven betting. And I was just hearing you guys kept talking about this buzzword value. And, you hear a lot of people on these shows talk about value and stuff, but really it seems like not a lot of them have a really good grasp of what it really means. To me, the way I like to bet, value is really just anything where you're getting a better percentage or you're getting better odds than what the sports book is marketing as the true odds or the implied odds. So for example, I was just looking at the Archers at plus 450 on Bet Rivers, and the implied probability on that's 18%. So, I mean, just watching them loosely a little bit the last couple of weeks, they strike me as having way more than a 20% chance to win this league. They seem to have the strongest offensive unit just in general. Midfield seems pretty strong. Obviously, it looks like, when they went against Atlas, that Atlas seemed like a more well-rounded team. But maybe you guys could speak to just the PLL as a whole. It seems to be much more of an offensive league. And I would assume some of these teams that have stronger defense and goalie, like the Redwoods and such, are maybe not going to be there deep into the run for the playoffs. So it strikes me like plus 450, a team like the Archers, and obviously the Atlas look pretty good too. But that a more offensive driven team is going to be the one standing on top when it's all said and done. But yeah, I just wanted to make a commentary too. It's like, you talk to some of these teams that are like 20-1, 30-1 and stuff, but it's not value if that team, if a lot of these models make that team out to have a 4% chance or a 6% chance. So just wanted to kind of give my input on that. But what do you guys think about that as far as what kind of a team is going to be winning this in terms of, the makeup of the team, offense or defense? You hear a lot of times in the NFL, defense wins championships, and then offensive lines, are really the ones that separate, different teams. But what do you guys think for the PLL? Is it going to be much more of like an offensive team? Do you think that's going to get on top, or you think just an overall well-rounded team like the Atlas or Chaos is going to be much more of a contender?
Yeah, I think it's a great point too about value because I think the PLL is interesting compared to other sports leagues because I'm an Orioles fan. I've loved this run going on. I'm not rushing to go bet Orioles World Series future or even the AL League Championship just because the fact that their odds are so long. They've been playing well, but you make a good point with finding value, and that's why I think with the PLL it's interesting because you look at a Chrome team that the market said isn't going to be any good again this year just based on past results. But, if you were paying attention to their offseason, they made a lot of moves to kind of reinforce all areas of their team. So I do think it's offensive-driven league, but I do think you need a strong defense. And so that's why I would say the team that has overall all the pieces, offense, defense, and strong presence at the face-off is going to be the team to win. And the only exception, I think, to that is the Archers because they are so efficient on offense and defense that they can kind of mask their issues at the face-off stripe a little bit. And I do think Ignacio, the reason I like the Archers a lot, because I do think Ignacio is going to get better as the season progresses. I think he was dealt a kind of tough hand coming in week one as a rookie, missing a couple weeks, and now coming back. But, yeah, to that point, I do think I'm glad you brought up about value because I think value is talked about in different ways, but like you said, it's implied odds versus their actual odds. And the other thing with the PLL to consider, too, is the fact that because all the teams make the playoffs, like, I mentioned that I like the Water Dogs' future, but maybe you want to wait on the Water Dogs because if you think they're the fourth or fifth best team in the league, you're not one of the top teams, they're probably going to be underdogs heading into the playoffs. So rather than betting a future on them now, just bet them on the money line as underdogs, through the playoffs. And that's another way to maybe find more value on a team as opposed to finding it in the futures market. But I'll let Charlie kind of touch on the Archers because I think he can kind of hit on that a little bit more than I can.
Yeah, the one problem with the Archers year over year is their face-off problems, which I think Hutton laid out pretty well. I don't think it affects as much as people might think, but it definitely plays a role because if they're playing, say, the Atlas, and the Atlas score 3 or 4 goals in a row, they're going to play a different style of offense and defense based on being down in that hole and knowing that they're probably going to lose most of the face-offs for the rest of the game. You're going to probably play faster on offense. You're going to try to slow the game down on defense, maybe play out a little more, try to force turnovers. I think just knowing that you're probably going to bat 35, 40% at best at the face-off X kind of changes your strategy a little bit from a game planning perspective. And obviously the Archers are one of the most explosive offenses in the league. That's never been the question. Defense, they have former defensive player of the year, Graham Hossack. They have Matt McMahon, who's obviously really good. And Gittleman's not bad in goal either. But I think that at the end of the day, the teams that get hot at the right time and have the least gaping holes at positions of importance end up taking it. Like you saw with the Chaos last year, their offense kind of clicked towards the end of the season. Blaze Reardon started playing like the best goal in the league towards the end of the season. All those things kind of come into play. And I think that personally, the Archers just, you've seen it in the past couple of games. They play close games against teams that maybe they shouldn't play close games against. And that has a lot to do with the face-off X. So that's where I think that Archer's bet lies.
Great question.
Let me ask you guys too, real quick, if you don't mind me interrupting. You know, if you guys follow the NHL and some of the advanced analytics and that, there's kind of a stat, I'm blanking on it right now, but basically they can kind of gauge if a goalie is really kind of stealing a game, and what the value of that is overall. And obviously, it's a very volatile thing to really bank on. But do you guys think that is kind of a thing in the PLL that could really stand out? You know, some of these teams that have just such a dominant goal presence. That they can make a hot run, at least give you a chance where you might take a team that is, a subpar team overall, but you're getting long odds on them, and you might make it to the semifinal or the final and have a chance to hedge out. Do you guys think that is something to bank on, hot goalie, or what teams would you guys target for that mindset?
Well, I think it's a great question because if you think about last season, and you can never really say, oh, well, the Whipsnakes were kind of out of it, but the Whipsnakes were struggling between the cages. We're talking all about Kyle Bernlohr and the season that he's having, but it's because of what a stark contrast it is to what he was doing behind the pipes last year. Fipsy comes in last year in kind of his relief, and he was playing pretty stellar. He has a damn good defense in front of him. So, I think there is something to, across all sports, a team peaking at the right time. So I don't know if any of you guys have anything more as far as specifics as it relates to lacrosse, but I think I always want to be backing a team who's playing their best as they head in. It was years ago when it happened, but think about, in the NFL with the Giants, when they were 8-8 squeaking into the playoffs, they end up taking down a team who was 16-0 going into it. So they were playing their best football at the right time, and I think that kind of does go across any sports. I don't know if any of you guys want to hop in and, speak to that a little bit more before we start getting into some of this All-Star game and our Week 6 leans. I'm not sure if you guys have anything to tie a bow on that, because a great question by the guy.
Yeah, I think you can definitely see that in PLL, and I think you saw it last year with Blaze Reardon leading the Chaos, having such a spectacular run. And give credit to their defense, because their defense played really well schematically through those 3 games as well. But that's where I think, I don't want to say back a hot goaltender necessarily, because there's volatility there. You could see Nick Morocco played really well the first 2 weeks and hasn't played super well recently, and the Cannons are losing games. So I definitely think, I wouldn't say base your pick off of a hot goaltender, but I do think, just like in hockey, that lacrosse is very much predicated on having a hot goaltender, or even, if you have a cold goaltender. Redwoods were in some tight games, but Troutner wasn't playing his best, and that could be the reason why they lost a few of those games as well. So I definitely think goaltender and face-off guys, even though face-off guys don't necessarily lead to more goals, the momentum swings can definitely be more drastic if you don't have a guy that's at the top.
I don't think you need necessarily an elite player at the faceoff position and the goaltending position, but I think that if you don't have at least an average player at either of those positions, it's definitely detrimental to your team. So I think you got to look at that too.
Yeah, and thanks for hopping in, Doc, and also thanks for dropping some of that explanation behind what really makes value, implied probability, and using, potential markets to kind of tell you what odds makers are thinking that implied probability is. So great join in by the listeners. That's why we love doing this live Twitter space, so we can get your thoughts all along the way. The hive mind doesn't always pick winners, but when we're all educating each other, makes us all better bettors. So good job across the way there. So boys, let's get into Week 6 here. Just some early thoughts, nothing that we're going to be telling you take the rubber band off on or anything, unless maybe some of these guys do have a max bet that they want to throw in here. I personally don't. The only thing that I've bet, and I actually don't love it the more that I start diving into the game, I just thought the total in this Chaos Whipsnakes game at 22.5 seemed like a rat line to tell you to take the under, just because these teams typically go low scoring. So the only thing that I've actually bet is the over that 22.5, just a small, half unit play. So that's the only thing that I have in my pocket. But let's start with this Atlas Redwoods game. Atlas 2.5-point favorites. I think it's pretty merited. The total 23.5. So the weekly question is, what the hell is up with the Redwoods? Charlie, I'm going to get your thoughts on this. Anything that you're betting in this game, because honestly, a lot of the time it makes me sick when I'm laying 2.5 goals. I think I might get a little sick trying to take the Redwoods and talk them into it. They just look like they're in a bad way, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I'd get sick laying 1.5 in the PLL. So 2.5, I'm probably going to take the Redwoods. These two teams, like, they've been playing pretty similar lacrosse over the past couple of weeks. Like, the Atlas have won 2 1-goal games, and the Redwoods have lost 2 1-goal games. Do we think that's going to continue? Do we think that the Redwoods are going to keep losing close games and Atlas going to keep winning them? I don't know. I think 2.5 is a pretty safe play here. I'm not going to say I'm going to take anything right now because I looked at these lines about an hour and a half ago. But 2.5s in PL pretty automatic. Atlas haven't been covering 1.5, so I don't know why they would cover 2.5 here, especially if Baptiste isn't playing. If Baptiste isn't playing, I'm going to lock in the Redwoods money line because I think that Yerlin has a distinct face-off advantage over, I think, who's the backup? Fop? Yeah, okay, so it's Fop. I think that Yerlin, he's gonna pick it up. He's gonna go back to his old ways, like 58% face-off wins. Teams been playing a lot better than their record suggests the past 2 weeks. I think they finally get one this time. So that's what I would play. But I'll probably look more into it next week.
Yeah, and I know that Erlin's hoping that there is no Baptiste because he just got owned when these two teams played earlier this year. It was a June 4th game. It was 17-11, the final. Atlas taking down the Woods, and Baptiste just rolled all over. Even Erlin couldn't find his way, couldn't face his way out of a paper bag. Talking a lot about this Baptiste injury, not having him in the All-Star game affects how we're betting that. Like, Krabs, part of the excitement of getting these lines so early is we'll get to track the line moves. It's also an opportunity for bettors who are paying attention to maybe the tea leaves that the sportsbook aren't to get a good number. So, with this line being up 2.5, sure, it's juice to the Redwoods minus 150. But what do you think? Like, if Baptiste isn't playing, you think this is something that people should maybe rush to bet now? Like, how are you going to do it?
Yeah, so I'm curious if you guys have seen the lines move at all yet. If you have, please cut me off and let me know now. But if not, I think we have to play the Redwoods now because I don't think there's a single chance that Baptiste plays in this game from what I've been hearing. And that is huge, obviously, not just for, the play on the field, but just mentally for Earden and just for the Redwoods in general. Having, the best player on the field out is huge, both physically and mentally, and I think it gives the Redwoods life. And I've been chomping at the bit, just waiting for a realistic opportunity where I can back my boys. And I think it's actually finally here. It's the worst team in the league versus the best team in the league. Like you guys said, the plus 2.5, it's a no-brainer. I don't see why we don't lock this in now if we don't think Baptiste is going to play, and I really don't. What's the rush for them? There's no way they rush him back, especially against the Redwoods, in my opinion. And I think his injury is pretty serious. So I don't think we see him play. I think we just lock this in now because if he gets ruled out and that line goes back to 1.5, we're going to be way more mad than if we bet the plus 2.5 now and it moves from minus 150 to minus 160. We're not going to care if that happens, but we are going to care if we lose a whole point on the spread versus a team that we've seen get big leads and just absolutely melt them away late. And that's the Atlas. They still find ways to win, but it's always been close. So that's why I kind of want to lock this one in now. And I want your guys' opinions.
We've seen the 2.5-point spread 10 times in the PLL in the last 2 seasons. It's 7-3 going towards the dog. Hutton, a lot of good points there made by Krabs on just, hey, could this potentially move 1.5? I think this is going to be a really interesting peek inside the mind of the sports books. How much stock do they put into a single player, especially at a position like faceoff? Is it enough to move it a point? Is it enough to move it heavy juice either way? Are you betting this or rushing to bet anything? If not, what are you kind of thinking in this one?
Yeah, if Baptiste plays, I really like Atlas minus 2.5. Now, if we get word that he's playing, you might not get it at plus 120 like you're getting it now, but I don't see it going that drastically. At worst, it's probably even money. I think this Atlas team is still just much better. But I actually agree with Krabs' strategy. If you like the Redwoods, get in now because if Baptiste is ruled out, that line's going to get worse. And God forbid it does move to 1.5. You're going to be upset about that, not getting in on it, earlier with the Redwoods and vice versa with the Atlas too. Like, if you bet that now, and it moves to a 1.5, you're going to be annoyed that you're sitting there with a 2.5 and they only win by 1, or two goals or whatever. So I think if you like the Atlas or you're waiting to hear from Baptiste, you wait. If you like the Redwoods, regardless if Baptiste is in or not, play it right now, because worst case, Baptiste is rolled back. You can maybe double down a little bit on the Redwoods if you still like them, or you just sit back and, you still have a chance, because the Redwoods still could cover this 2.5 point spread, even if Baptiste is playing. I'd like the Atlas, if Baptiste is playing, but I don't think there's as much risk as if you're betting the Atlas minus 2.5 right now. So agree with Krabs' logic, even if I'm on the other side.
All right, well, boys, since it's early enough that, we'll have plenty of time to dive in, check those line moves. I think a lot of good information on that one. So let's get into this Chaos Whip Snakes game. Whips are 1.5 point favorites, total 22.5. This will be the second time these two teams are playing this year. It was a 9-8 win for the Whip Snakes. That was back same week, June 4th, 2022. All three of these times these teams have played, it has hit the under. We've seen totals at 22.5. Most recently, the championship total was 23.5. That goes under by the hook. And then you had a 22.5. So typically low totals with these teams. They haven't hit an over yet, which kind of made me lean towards going that over, just because I think Chaos showed they have a propensity to score now that they have their horses back. I think they know they have to kind of dig themselves out of a hole. And I think this game potentially between Chaos and Whip Snakes, with the added rest for both of the teams, it could potentially be one of those track meets, though it hasn't been historically the matchup that we've seen before these two teams. That's why I leaned over. Krabs, what are you looking at in this game? Do the Chaos return after showing and returning with a vengeance with their horses getting a win? You think that rolls over through 2 weeks on a bye?
Yeah, I'm with you, boys. I like the Chaos on this one. I think they get it done, in my opinion. It's kind of like a little restart that Blaze Reardon, I think, needs, having a couple weeks off, to be honest with you, because he has been something this season. He's not been his normal self, not his MVP self. So I think the break is honestly huge. I'm sure he's been grinding over the last 2 weeks, probably being like, what the heck's going on? So I will be all over the Chaos next coming weekend. I think it's a great look. I don't hate the ML. I'm going to take the plus 1.5. It's only at minus 120 from what I'm seeing. And we all know what's good with the plus 1.5s. So if it's a plus 120 to minus 120 difference, I'm willing to eat the 40 cents and take the plus 1.5 because of how profitable it's been in the PLL. And I'm sure DraftKings is listening to this and adjusting accordingly. So if you are, kick rocks. But that's by far, without a doubt, they'll play in this spot.
I'm wondering, Hutton, what are you doing in this one? And just to kind of back up what he was saying there in Krabs' case, talking about the 1.5 and knowing what's good. We've seen 32 times a team getting 1.5 on 48 different occasions, covering that 1.5 point spread. So covering on all spreads 55% of the time, just underdogs against the spread in the PLL going back the past 2 years are 39 and 19. That's a 67% blindly backing underdogs against the spread in PLL betting. So yeah, Krabs, we do know what's good with that underdog. And as an underdog bettor, that's why I love the PLL so much. Are the dogs barking again, Hutton? What do you think? And then Charlie, you can give your thoughts before we swing on into the Archers.
Yeah, I lean Chaos plus 1.5. I think it'll be a closer game now that the Chaos have all their offensive pieces. Defense still hasn't been playing well. Their best game, though, was against the Whip Snakes. And Blaze Reardon did just post a 20-save game last week. So it's encouraging going into the All-Star break. Like Krabs said, he hadn't been playing his best up until last week. Last week pitched a gem, and it's probably the reason why they beat the Cannons. So I lean Chaos plus 1.5. I want to wait on this, though, a little bit because right now faceoffs haven't been a huge issue for them, but it could rear its ugly head against the Whip Snakes going up against Nardella, even though week one they did all right with Tommy Kelly. I think you want to wait and see if Max Adler returns, because I don't think, even though I'm saying this now, maybe they're listening, but I don't think Max Adler being reinserted is going to move the line that much, but I think it's a big push for this Chaos team to make it competitive like they did in the championship last year. But I'm with you. I like the over. It's another one, though, I might wait on, honestly, because I know the public tends to like playing the overs, but I think given the fact that people are going to look at this matchup and say, Blaze Reardon just pitched a 20-save game, Burnler's been on fire. This game went under last time they played. I think you might see the line move in the under's favor a little bit, maybe get a little bit more. So right now, DraftKings, it's minus 130 to play the over. So I would wait, because worst case, even if that doesn't end up coming to pass, you still might be able to get a better number on Caesars. If they post a better, less juice, or maybe you'll get a more favorable line somewhere else. So I would just wait on playing the over right now, but that's kind of my early lean. And again, Chaos, I just want to see what their pieces are going to be against this Whipsnakes team. Whipsnakes team are another team too that have some guys that are injured, missing the All-Star game. Hopefully it's not too serious for them, but if a guy like Matt Dunn, who's out for the All-Star game, is out come week 6, that's also going to push it kind of in the Chaos favor. So I'm just going to wait to see that injury report and who's coming back for the Chaos and Whipsnakes before I really put any bets on this game.
Yeah, nothing really new to add. I just think that the Chaos, when they first played the Whipsnakes in week 1, they lost by 1, and that was with a roster full of practice players. So I think that with the 2-week hiatus for the all the guys the Chaos got back, they've been playing the NLL since God knows when, basically in since November, right? Something like that. Anyways, they need a rest. They need a nice 2-week break. They'll come back energized. And I kind of like the over, like you guys said. The easy bet is, the 2 best goalies in the league going against each other under all day. Both these teams like to shoot the ball a lot. I think that if they both have average games or even slightly above average games, we still get an over. So I like the over 22.5 and the Chaos plus 1.5.
Love it. And since we've already gone a healthy hour here, that's what I love, is we're always like, it's kind of just all-star game. We got games to preview, so we'll probably go a little bit shorter. No, not on Bet on Lacrosse. We are an over show. Take the over always, even though we love betting on unders. I'm going to package these last two together because it's just kind of leans for me. This is the Archers minus 2.5 against Cannons, total 24.5. Cannons plus 2.5 is probably going to be the look for me, but that's too gross to bet a week and ahead. They just look bad right now. Also with Lyle Thompson popping up on the injury report, I got to know if he's playing before I'm backing this team, because we've seen what they look like without Lyle Thompson. The other one is this Chrome minus 1.5 and Water Dogs total 24.5. Chrome the favorite in that one. The question is, are the Water Dogs back? So Charlie, I'm going to throw it your way. Thoughts on either of those two games? Because I just don't have anything for me that's really actionable to share. On next week's show, I'll probably have a little bit more to dive in on. But any early thoughts on this Archers Cannons or the Chrome Water Dog game?
For Archers Cannons, I haven't really looked into it, but I kind of like the under already, because last time these two teams played, it was 29 goals scored or something like that, right? And the Archers put 20 by themselves. So I think everyone's going to expect kind of a repeat performance for both teams. I think it'll be probably a little closer. 2.5, probably right about where the line should be. The Cannons have looked pretty bad, so I'm not really looking at that right now, but I'd probably play the Cannons blindly 2.5 just because of the 2.5 stats we have in the last 2 seasons. Chrome Water Dogs, I've been riding the Water Dogs train. I kind of talked them up as a championship favorite, or not favorite, but I like this plus 700 on their championship odds. I think the Chrome are a really good team, but every good team has rough patches of the season. I think the Chrome might have just started theirs. So I think the Water Dogs plus 1.5 and the money line, probably the play for me. Total, I'm staying away for right now. I got to look more into it, but those are my plays.
Krabs, what about you? Anything that you're trying to hammer? I know we don't have any props up for these yet. Typically, those come the Tuesday before the games, late in the evening, so hopefully we're getting any of them. So anything that you're playing as far as side total or any maybe potential props that you're hoping for?
Yeah, give me Asher Nolting over anything in this game once it comes up on Prize Picks or wherever. Dude's a dog. He's been balling this year, especially if the Cannons are still missing Thompson. I mean, give me a break. This dude is going to have the rock in his stick the entire game. And he's been killing it. He's been hitting his numbers damn near every week. I love this prop. The dude out there looks like a man amongst boys. He does not look like a rookie. So I will be definitely taking him over probably his points. But I'm not really confident to give out anything on any sides here until we figure out if Lyle Thompson's playing.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Asher Nolting, he really does seem like he's coming into his zone. He came out of the gate, with that kind of 2-man game with Lyle, and now, we'll get even more of an opportunity to see when he is the guy How does he keep on playing? So, yeah, if they do win the game, it would be because Asher Nolting is balling out for sure. Hutton, you'll get the last word on this. Any other thoughts on this Archers Cannons or the Chrome Water Dogs matchup? And again, you won't get to be with us next week, so give us your thoughts before we start diving in next week on really some of our best bets that we'll be getting into.
Yeah, I think Archer's Cannons is a good one to maybe bet live. It's one that I just don't want to touch yet, even if I find out that, Lyle's healthy, and we're getting both the, full strength. It's just one that it worries me that the Archers obviously dominated the Cannons last time, 20-9, but lost the faceoff battle. I think that's something that could, we could see some balance come more into play than it was last time, if Stephen Kelly does have a big game at the stripe for the Cans again. So I'm going to pass on this one, but I think it's a good live bet opportunity. I like what Charlie was saying about the under potential in this game, but what I would do is probably wait, bet pre-flop, and just see how the game starts off, because if we see a bunch of goals, that total is going to rise, 27, 28 maybe, and you might be able to get a favorable under there. That's kind of been my strategy. Is a lot of these teams start out fast. Still haven't dived into the numbers yet, but anecdotally, teams start out fast and then they slowly, peter off. That Chrome Atlas game looked like it was going to soar way over, and while it still did go over eventually, it wasn't as high as people thought, and I ended up cashing in on a 29.5, I think, maybe even a 28.5 on that one. So again, just the important thing to realize when it comes to some of these. And then as far as Chrome Water Dogs, I lean Water Dogs plus 1.5. I kind of like them on the money line too, but I just want to see what Dylan Ward's status is before I bet this one. So nothing that's really getting me there, and I'm kind of considering the under at 24.5, because these teams have been getting into high scoring games, and obviously the last matchup was high scoring, but I think their defenses have been playing better, even though the Atlas, put up a bunch of points on them last week. I do think this Chrome defense, seeing each other for a second time, it's going to play to a more low-scoring affair. So maybe you wait and you bet this one live as well, but leaning under and leaning Water Dogs plus 1.5.
So, and Krabs, I know you got your thoughts in on what you were potentially playing in the Archers Cannons, Asher Nolting over anything. Any thoughts on this Chrome Water Dogs game? Total 24.5, Chrome the 1.5 point favorite before we wrap things up here on another live edition of Bet on Lacrosse.
Water Dogs ML. I'm with you guys. This is a underperforming Water Dogs team starting to trend up now that they've got their guys back. And they're playing against an overperforming Chrome, who I don't think is good as their 4-run second place spot right now in the PLL, in my opinion. I'm rooting for you guys on those futures tickets because those are going to pay out hefty. Just not, this coming weekend or next coming weekend in this matchup, because I'm going to be hammering the Water Dogs, barring any crazy injuries or crazy stuff beforehand. But I absolutely love them. I'm cutting the shit, going right to the chase, not taking the plus 1.5 here. I think they win outright. I like the ML at plus 115, plus 120. What I get them at, the Water Dogs will be barking, and they will be winning this one outright, in my opinion.
Outright, says Krabs. You can hear him behind the lines with Book It Sports. Follow him, Krabs Bets. Guys, you know what? Bye weeks are for fucking chumps, because we just gave all kinds of info all show long. We started with team futures, talked some MVP, got into the All-Star game, and then gave you some early thoughts and some info with trends all along the way on week 6. We will be back in a week's time breaking down our best bets here on Bet on Lacrosse. But huge thanks to the listeners joining in. Thanks to Doc. Great question. Talking some implied odds as well and implied value. Always love hearing from our listeners. You can always hit that request to speak button and we'll get you in as quickly as possible. So for the crew, for my guy Charlie White, Hutton Jackson, our special guest Krabs Bets, I'm Dan Alexander, and we'll talk to you next time on Bet on Lacrosse. Hopefully, no, not even hopefully, screw that, with some more money in our pocket from our All-Star Game bets. Best of luck, folks. Bet responsibly, and we'll talk to you next week here on BOL.